All right, we're going to get started. Last class, remember, we went over the schedule, we went over the test. I lectured on Chapter 3, and we did the test review, which meant we didn't have time to do the calculator version 3 and some array programs. So I'm going to start with that today, and we're going to work our way through based off of that. All right. So the other day, I sent you an email. In fact, you got another email from me today, but just for now, disregard that one. But I sent you an email, I think it was Friday, that had the shell of the calculator. In other words, it has in it this. All right. So in other words, we've got a bunch of routines here that there's no code in. So I'd like you to bring that up if you would. And my hope is that we can get that running fairly quickly, and then I'll talk about what we'll be doing for the rest of the class. Remember, we only have 4 days today. I will tell you, and you might say, well, yeah, I got to work that extra day or whatever, and I get that stuff. But if you're behind, if you have not turned in the last assignment or the last couple assignments or whatever, please try to catch up. I'll give you some credit for it if you turn it in late. I'd rather have you turn it in late than not turn it in at all. I mean, I'd hate to see it where you're a few points away from a certain grade, all right, and you lose that grade because you haven't turned in assignments. All right, so again, this is the third calculator program, and like I said, this is what it looks like right now. It's just got a bunch of empty functions in it. So if I go in and I run this right now, it's not going to do anything because these functions have not yet been implemented. Okay, everybody found that copy? Brought it up? All right, then let's start taking a look at it. First thing that you'll notice here, and again, just kind of for ease of usage, so I have everything in one file. I do literally have everything in one file. But I want you to take a look. Here are the variables. Hopefully these we don't have to go over anymore. Those are just the two numbers that you're reading in. Okay? All right. This is the operation. If you enter a 1, you want to add. If you enter a 2, you want to subtract. If you enter a 3, you want to multiply. If you enter a 4, you want to divide. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. Again, I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible. This will literally be the answer. All right? So it'll either, as it says there, it'll either be the sum, the difference, the product, or the quotient. That's it. All right? Notice that that one is 0.0, and the reason for that is we're going to set it up so that if you do a divide, that we're going to preserve the decimal place. You won't have any decimal if you add two integers, subtract one integer from another, or multiply one integer from another. So it's just for the divide. We could have added a modulo onto this. I just decided not to, but we could have added that just as well. All right. So this is going to be a 1, 2, 3, or 4. Okay, literally, it'll be a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4. It'll be that number. This will be either a plus sign, a minus sign, a multiply sign, or a divide sign. So really, op and the op are very much they're pretty much the same thing, except one is the actual sign itself, and one is an integer representing the sign. This is something new. There's nothing special about the word again, but this is something we're going to put it into a loop so that we're able to run the program as many times as we want to add it. I will tell you when you do your next hands-on test, which I believe is next week, I don't even remember, it might be the week after that, whatever. But when you do your next hands-on test for Chapters 3 and 4, one of the problems that you'll have on there, you'll have to put it into a loop. All right. And when you think about it, it makes sense. If right now, with the first couple iterations of the calculator that we've done, if we wanted to do 10 different calculations, we'd have to run the program 10 times. That's kind of a waste of time. All right. And with this, we'll be able to run it as many times as we want. Wanna, which is a stupid name because I was feeling stupid, but it's going to be a way that we're going to be able to continue working on the program. All right, we're going to ask the user, do you want to run it again? Then we're going to grab just the first character that they answer, because we're going to tell them to enter a Y if they want to run the program again and an N if they don't. All right, but what if instead of Y they put in yes? Okay, so wanna is what we're going to ask them, yes or no, do you want to run the program again? Then regardless of what they type in, we're just going to pluck off the first character. Does all that make sense? Any questions on any of those variables? All right. So this is the driver. So literally what we're going to end up doing in main is we're going to be calling a bunch of routines. All right. So we'll start off by saying num1 equals input a number, and we're going to pass in there the word first. All right? And then I'm just going to copy this and have num2, and that's going to be second. Oops, I don't want that to be a semicolon. I want that to be a semicolon. All right, so that's what we have so far. Now, I'm going to do something. I don't want you to do this. I'm going to run the program, but if you run it right now, it's going to put it into an infinite loop. But that's okay, because I just want to show you. Part of the thing to understand and start to realize how to debug stuff is not to try to do too much at one time. What is it? There's an old joke. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Well, when you're writing code, you shouldn't sit there and write hundreds of lines and then start to test. You should write a little, test a little. Write a little more, test a little more. So if you'll notice, if I run this right now, and again, you don't have to do this. If I click calculate, well, it doesn't like something, so let's take a look. Oh, because I haven't written input a number yet. So we're going to input the first number, and we're going to input the second number. So let's go down and write that routine that's called input a number. So we'll do that one right now. We're going to skip back and forth in this program. All right. The good news is this input a number, this is literally one line long. All right. So we're going to return. I'm going to probably put it over 2 lines just because it'll stretch way over and you won't be able to see everything otherwise. I guess I can put it all in one line. All right, and I need another. Again, as you start doing this stuff, because this can drive you nuts, let's pretend it's whenever your next test is, your next hands-on test, and you look at your code and it appears to be correct, at least in your mind, it appears to be correct. But if you look up on the screen here, again, we looked at this the other day. Now I have one too few right parentheses. All right? So notice I've got one left parenthesis, a second left parenthesis, but only one right parenthesis. So I go and I run the program. And nothing happens. And this gets unbelievably frustrating. As we talked about before, when that happens, hit your F12 key and go over to the console, and it will show you, or at least the program will try to show you, where you have an error. All right, so it looks like it's one of these lines. So I'm going to click on the first one that says line 51. All right, and oh, I should have brought it up. I don't know why it's not. Well, I'll even go back to here. All right, line 51. Well, look, there's the line that doesn't have the parenthesis in it. All right, so I put that back in again. So now I have 2 right parentheses. I save, and I try to run the program again. Notice now it tells me to enter the first number because I passed in the word first. Then it tells me to enter the second number. Now it's in an infinite loop right now because I didn't, I just wanted to show you that. The point is, and the other thing is, let's say you get into an infinite loop like this, and you're like sort of embarrassed and sort of upset, and you don't really even know what to do. If that happens when you're in an infinite loop, I mean, look, I can't do anything. It just keeps asking me. I can't click cancel. Nothing's working. So I can do a Control-Alt-Delete and go down to where it says Task Manager. And somewhere in there it says, oh, look, you're running this with Chrome. So I can click on Chrome and tell it to end the task. That's how you regain control. If you forget how to do that, or if it doesn't appear to work or whatever, I don't want it where you're working on a test and you're like, I can't do anything, the thing's not working. Then raise your hand and ask. All right? I didn't hear what.
Like, you know how you kept hitting OK and it kept popping
Uh-huh.
up, and below it there was a checkbox?
No, all that checkbox is, well, let's run it. We'll try it.
That's what I did on mine.
Oh, it did work on yours?
Yeah, whenever
All
I
right.
refreshed it, it just
All right.
started doing it again.
So here?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That won't work all the time. I can tell you that. I can tell you that from personal experience. All right? But what I showed you, other than that, that will always work. But the point is, what I want you to get across here is, notice, when we called it the first time, we passed the word first, and we called it the second time, we passed the word second. So it did come in and it said, please enter the first number, then it said, please enter the second number. So right now, I can do an alert here. You don't have to do this, but I can do an alert that says, the first number input was, and I can say, plus first. No, not first, that'd be num1. Num1. And then I could say the second number input was num2. And if I save it and run the program again, all right, and I'll put in different numbers, 44 and 66. And notice it tells me the first number input was 44, the second number input was 66. All right? So I know that part of it works. That's how you should be coding. But the problem is people in their zeal or whatever you'd call it to get stuff done, I've watched people do this. All right? I helped a young lady when I was at Blackhawk. She had a really well-written program, but it was 200 or 300 lines. She said, this won't work. And I said, well, what happened when you ran it? Oh, this is the first time I ran it. She typed in 300 lines of code and didn't even run the program once. You're asking for trouble when you do that. You're human. You may not like hearing this, but you're not infallible. I'm sure not. You're going to make mistakes typing or something sooner or later. Everyone does. All right, so that's what we've got so far. Now, if I want to, I can just comment these out. So if I want to look at them later, I can do that. I don't have to do that, but I can if I want to. And I tend to do that a lot in the code because this is another way of doing some very elementary debugging. All right. Then the next thing I want to do is I want to say op equals choose operation, which is the next routine that's down here. All right. So op equals choose operation. So that's the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to choose the operation. Again, this is not going to be a long program. And the way that I'm going to write this routine, this is not going to be a long routine. And the way I'm writing it is not the only way to write it. When you start to write your own stuff, I want you, again, I've said this before, no jokes. I don't want you to become clones of me. I want you to learn to think on your own and to write things the way that you think they should be written. All right? So I'm going down to this routine that's called choose operation. And again, this is how I'm writing it. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines long. All right, I'm going to cheat here. And of course, these are all going to, bless you, these are all going to change in just a second. me see, spell please wrong. All right. There's only one more line in this routine, and it's return. That's the whole routine. So, trace is the word. Anybody see anything wrong with the way this is currently written? I'm just asking. If you don't, that's okay. I'm going to run it, and hopefully then you'll see what's wrong. Oh, I don't have a... Well, that should have actually worked. Well, the point is, I should have had \ns at the end of each one of these, right? Because I want each thing there to appear on its own line. In fact, I'm going to put 2 of them there so it looks a little nicer. Now, str op equals operation. Choose operation. Choose operation, choose up. Well, it's not working, and I honestly don't know why right now. All right, let's see if we can let JavaScript figure out, or I'm going to hit F12 again and see if I can figure out what the problem is. Unexpected token on line 62. Okay. Line 62. Oh, I don't put the word var in there every time. That's on me. If I do stupid stuff like that, feel free to raise your hand and say, you're doing stupid stuff right there. Because that's recreating the variable every time. Now let's try to run it, and I'll come right back to the code, but I want to see if it works. 100, 100. See now how we've got that? That's by putting those \ns in there. Otherwise, it would have all ran together and it would have looked really ugly. All right, it still is in a loop, but we'll fix that in just a minute. So here's that routine. Does everybody realize that what we're doing in here in the gray is we're just building a string and we're adding to it every time? To me, it's easier to do it this way than to build it inside of a parse_int statement. If I took all this stuff that's here, if I took all this and threw it in here, that would be very hard. It would be very unwieldy. It wouldn't look very decent, so to speak. So what we've done so far, if you look up on the screen here, is we said, okay, let us input our first number, let us input our second number, and now let us input a number that's going to represent the operation that we want to perform. So again, I can come down here and I can put another alert in here and I can say the operation chosen was, and then here put op. Save it, run it one more time. 100, 100, and I'll take a 3. And it says the operation chosen was 3. So that's good. I can run through it if I want to. The thing is right now, just so you know this, there are problems with the program if you didn't realize it. For instance, if I go in, well, and run it again, I think I'll have to rerun it. I put it into a loop.
Hi,
But,
Peter King with the MMQB here, and
yeah,
this
thanks,
is
Peter.
the MMQB Extra.
That's
for
what I was doing
week
this
9.
morning. So, all right. Heck, let's close that. There we go. All right, there's your attendance. Okay. If I run this again, and I put in a first number, I put in a second number. Now, let's say I put in here 67. Notice it says the thing chosen was 67. Well, because we haven't written code yet to just handle 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But we know now we're able to enter our first number, we're able to enter our second number, and we're able to enter a code that represents our operation. Does that make sense to everyone? Because I'm just going to go on. All right? The next program, or not next program, I'm sorry, the next function is going to allow us to come in. It's going to allow us to come in now, and it's going to let us write a switch statement that's going to handle, that basically is going to say, if we entered a 1, call a routine to add the numbers. If we enter a 2, call a routine to do the subtraction. If we enter a 3, call a routine to do the multiplication. If we enter a 4, call a routine to do a division. If we enter anything other than a 1, 2, 3, or 4, give the user an error message. Does that make sense? All right. And that routine is going to be the one where we actually, basically come in here and, what did I call it? Generate answer. So I'm going to again take that alert that I just put in, I commented it out, and I'm going to now call generate answer. And please look up on the screen here. Notice I'm not saying something equals generate answer. So there's no return statement. This must have a return statement. This must have a return statement. This must have a return statement. This one I don't need a return statement because I'm not assigning it to anything. Those are the kind of things that have to make sense to you as we go on in here, because that's the way it'll work in this language, in the languages you use in the next 3 semesters. It'll always work that same way. All right? So I might spend a little time next semester going through something like that, but since it's the same as the stuff we've already learned, not very much. All right, so here's the one that we just did. And again, if you fell a little behind, don't worry about it. You can always fill that stuff in later. That's not really important, okay? But I want to get down to the generate answer. I don't want to spend all period on this program. We got too many other things to do. So I want to do a switch right here. Switch on what's called op. You may or may not remember, op is going to be either a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4. Does that make sense? It's going to be a 1 if we said we wanted to add, a 2 if we said we wanted to subtract, a 3 if we wanted to multiply, and a 4 if we wanted to divide. All right? So, what we're going to end up doing, notice we've got 4 routines right underneath called add, subtract, multiply, and divide. So, in other words, if it was a case 1, we're going to call add, and we're going to break. If it's case 2, we're going to call subtract. We haven't written these routines yet, but that's, whoops, and that's okay. And we're going to break. If it's a 3, we're going to call multiply, and we're going to break. If it's a 4, we're going to call divide, and we're going to break. Now, I have a question for you. If you look up on the screen here, I think, again, I think you're all smart people. All right? If it's a 1, you can see what we're doing. If it's a 2, you can see what we're doing. If it's a 3, you can see what we're doing. If it's a 4, you can see what we're doing. Everybody agree with that? What if you put in something that's not a 1, 2, 3, or 4? What do you think we should do? And I'm not going on until somebody at least gives me a guess. Break is one thing we could do, which would just get us out of there. And that's fine. I mean, that's the way a lot of programmers handle it. But what if we did this? All right? What if we did this? They evidently put in something that wasn't a 1, 2, 3, or 4, correct? So what if we had them call that function again, choose operation? Because remember, that does a 1, 2, 3, or a 4. All right? We could put break here if we want to. So if the person entered a 1, we're going to tell them to add the two numbers. If they entered a 2, we're going to tell them to subtract the second one from the first one. If they enter a 3, we're going to tell them to multiply the two numbers. If they entered a 4, we're going to tell them to divide the first number by the second number. And if they entered anything other than a 1, 2, 3, or 4, we're going to go right back up to here and ask them to put in a new code. Now, there's no accounting. I've said this before in other classes, and sometimes people laugh. They think I'm trying to be funny. I'm not. There's no accounting for human stupidity. In other words, if we keep putting in a number that's not a 1, 2, 3, or 4, it'll keep asking you again and again and again and again and again. Does that make sense? That's kind of a silly thing to do. We could check, and if you put in something that's not a 1, 2, 3, or 4, maybe we'll give you 3 or 4 chances. And if you can't do it in that time, we just give you a message that says, evidently you don't know how to run the program, or we could choose a default value or whatever. All right, I'm not going to run this now because if I ran this, it's going to call add, which does nothing. Or it's going to call subtract, which does nothing. Or it's going to call multiply, which does nothing. Or it's going to call divide, which does nothing. In fact, I will run it because right now, if I do run this, please look up on the screen here, and I put in something other than a 1, 2, 3, or 4 here, okay, so I'm going to put in here a 67, like I did before. This should come back up again. And you see it does. So we're forcing the user to stay in this routine until they put in a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4. Does that make sense? So what I'm starting to introduce to you is what's typically referred to as program input validation. We're validating the input to make sure that the values we put in there are what we want the user to put in there. All right? And guess what? You already know how to write these next routines. Well, what's add? Well, we're going to return num1 plus num2. What's subtract? We're going to return num1 minus num2. What's multiply? We're going to return num1 times num2. So we've got all those. Now, the one thing that I did do, if you look at the comment that's up on the screen here, I said do not allow an illegal divide by 0. All right, I believe if you try to divide by 0, you can check if you want, but I believe in JavaScript, if you try to divide by 0, it'll give you INF, which stands for what? INF, infinity, which technically, if you try to divide by 0, that's the answer, because it's not possible to divide by 0. With some programming languages, they'll give you the word infinity or INF. Some of them will give you 0. Most programming languages, when you attempt to divide by 0, the program will break. It'll bomb out right there. It'll give you what's called a program exception. So we have to check. Everybody understand that if it's add, we're just going to add the 2. Subtract, we're just going to subtract the 2. Multiply, we're just going to multiply the 2. Does that make sense? All right. So if it's a divide, we don't want to divide by 0. So the one we have to check is num2. So if num2 equal 0, then we know that the person is trying to do an illegal divide. So I said return illegal attempt to divide by 0. All right? And if that's not the case, then I can do an else and I can actually do the division. And this is such a good example, not because I wrote it, not at all. But the reason that this is a good example is it shows you, please look up on the screen here, either that's going to be returned or that's going to be returned. One of those two statements, either line 123 or line 127, one of those two statements must execute. Must. All right? But only one of them can. So I'm sure that when I get done with that routine, if I chose to divide, if I try to divide by 0, it's just going to give me a string that says illegal attempt to divide by 0. But if I didn't put a 0 there, not only is it going to do the division, it's going to immediately take it and format it to 2 decimal places. All right, by using the toFixed operation. So right now, we actually have the answer. We have the answer. All right? And I'm looking here, let's see. So we're calling add, we're calling ba-boom, ba-boom. I'm trying to make sure I didn't skip anything with what I'm showing you here. Because right now, if you look up on the screen here, we're calling generate answer. I think you'd all agree with that. So we're calling generate answer. What is generate answer doing? Well, it's doing this. It's calling add, or it's calling subtract, or it's calling multiply, or it's calling divide. Okay? And we're returning this, we're returning this, we're returning, but maybe I'm wrong, but I'm looking up here, we're not stuffing that into anything. All right? So I think, and I didn't do this, I think this is a mistake in my own code. This should have said, remember we got this thing called answer? I think this should have said ANS equals generate answer. All right? Now I'm not sure if what I just did was right or not, so I'm going to put another alert in here. And I'm going to say the answer was, and I'm going to run the program a few different times. I don't want op there. I want ANS. All right, so I'm going to run this program a few times, 100, 100, and I'm going to tell it to add. The answer is undefined. So something's screwed up. All right, let's try it again with something else. 100, 100 with a 2. Undefined. So it doesn't like me doing it that way. All right, so somehow that answer is getting lost. You know. All right, and I think I know what it is, but we'll fix it. Bless you. We'll fix it in just a minute. So, evidently, where I wrote ANS equals, I don't need that. I think it's okay because the program works. All right, I'm going off a working copy. So I'm just going to right now take that off. All right, so we've got, so far, we're inputting number 1, we're inputting number 2, we're calling generate answer, but remember, what I want to have print when it runs, so if I put in that 100 for num1, and I put in that 100 for num2, I want to be able to add them and have my output look like this. Does that make sense? So I have to go, this is the key thing. I want to have that plus sign. Right now it has just a 1 in there, which means that I'm going to add. But I want to be able to put that plus sign in there. So I have to do another operation in order to be able to do that. So the next routine that I'm going to call is generate the op. I've got generate answer. So now I'm going to say the op, which is going to be a plus sign or a minus sign or a multiply sign or a divide sign. That equals generate the op. Oops. So that's the line I just put in right there. And that line, I'll come right back up, but that line is also right here. All right, so we've got it. All right, so that's where we are in here is generate the op. And you might say, did you have to write it like this? If I wrote this program, if I sat down and had no notes, I would write it probably a little bit differently every time. I'd get it to work sooner or later, but probably that's where it is. Okay. The problem that we have is we're calling add, but we're not putting it any place. We're calling subtract, and we're not putting it any place. We're calling multiply, and we're not putting it any place. We're calling divide, and we're not putting it any place. Everybody agree with that? Kind of showed you that because the answer was undefined. Where do we want to put that answer? What variable that we have up here, in which of these variables? Read the comments. Which of those variables is going to hold our answer? It's not a trick. A and S. So, what I really should have done is I should have said here, A and S equals add, A and S equals subtract, not 2, A and S equals multiply, A and S equal divide. That was an error on my part. That's why nothing showed. All right? Now, I'm going to jump back, but I'll come back in just a second, but I want to show you. Now, if I take that alert that I had in here, all right, and if I run the program again, let's see if it changed. So, 100, 100. Let's add them. All right, well, it didn't show us anything. All right, so it's not getting hit yet. All right. So we've got the operation. Again, go back and change that to A and S equals, A and S equals, A and S equals, and A and S equals. All right? So we've got those. Now we have to actually come in. So we've got our add, we've got our subtract, we've got our multiply, we've got our divide. So now we've got to generate the op. Remember, this routine that's called generate the op is going to generate a plus sign or a minus sign or a multiply sign or a divide sign. Does that make sense to everyone? That's what its goal is, so to speak. All right? And again, like I said to you before, did we have to do it this way? No. This is just a way of doing it. Okay? So what I did, so we have even more practice using this switch statement, is I did a switch on op. Remember, op holds 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. So if it's case 1, the op equals a plus sign. And break. If it's a 2, it's subtract. A semicolon and a semicolon, and a semicolon and a semicolon. If it's a 3, it should be a multiply. And if it's a 4, it should be a divide. All right? And, well, what if it's not one of those? It should be a 1, 2, 3, or 4. We should be giving that in. But just in case, we can call that choose operation again. And break. That's the whole routine. Right there. What I'm going to do during the break is I'm going to print off 9 copies of this. So you'll have a hard copy. All right? So if you fell behind or for some reason you're like, I think I typed it in right, but it's not working, you'll be able to look at it. Again, I don't want to just keep giving you hard copies. I want you to be keying stuff in because you learn by keying in information and making mistakes. That's how you learn. So the only thing that we have left to do as far as, it just went off. As far as routines that we're calling, the only thing that we have left to do, and I'm hoping that comes back on. Here we go. Is we have to print out our results. Okay? So we've got all this stuff. We're inputting our first number. We're inputting our second number. We're choosing our operation, which is 1, 2, 3, or 4. Based on that, we're generating the sum, the difference, the product, or the dividend, or whatever the heck it's called. And then we're generating a plus sign, a minus sign, a multiply, or a divide. So the only thing that's left to do is to call print result. All right, so that's all. And that literally is a one-line routine. And it's just got an alert on it that's going to have everything there. All right. So I'm going to jump down to the bottom where we've got print result, which is way down at the bottom, right there. You know, print the result. All right. And it's an alert. And it's going to say here, num1 and that's it. We're not done with the program. There's one more thing we have to do. Boy, this is not good. Pardon me? Oh, you're right. If that's what you were saying, that was spelled wrong. Well, this is a new one. That hasn't been. Okay, you're right. Yeah, that was spelled incorrectly. But what I tried to do is build this for you a routine at a time. And as we built a routine, I tested that routine. Now, it's always important if I've got 5 or 6 different functions in here, you test all 6 functions, but you have to test to make sure all of them also work together with one another. All right? So let's try it. 100, 100, 1, 100, undefined. So something screwed up there, but it still has the answer. Okay? So I'm going to keep going. 100, 100, put in a 2. Again, I got to fix that, but 100 minus 100 is 0. 100, 100, 3. 100 times 100 should be 10,000, and it is. 100, 100, 4. That should be 1, and it is. So all of the operations work now. And again, as we looked at before, 100, 100, if I put in some junk, it just asks me to do it again. So everything that's in there works. The only thing that's not printing out something correctly right now is that undefined. All right, so we'll have to fix that. Let's take a look and see why that is. So the op right here is not being set. Well, there's the op. And this was generate the op. The op equals generate the op. That looks correct to me. Two, three, four. It looks like it should be correct. Not sure right now, taking a quick look at it, why it's putting undefined right there, but it is. All right. What I'm going to print off for you is the master, which I know doesn't have any errors on it. All right. What we're doing here doesn't make sense. That's the most important thing. And believe it or not, this is a pretty simple example. Okay. When we start to put this together and we add the actual HTML to it, it'll be more complex because we'll be using the get element by ID, etc., and a bunch of other stuff. So we are going to build this as a regular calculator that looks not exactly like this, but it's something more along the lines of that. We're going to build something like that as we move on. But I'm more concerned right now with you understanding the programming side of it and the logic side of it. That's why I'm showing it to you like this. All right, it's 8:55. Let's take a break. We'll come back in 10 minutes. And like I said, I'm going to grab the one I know works, and I'm going to run off 9 copies during the break. Yes, sir. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. Okay. And we're gonna try to see if we can figure out what the problem is. It's almost there, and whatever it is, at least is fairly minor. I'm still taping, so I'm gonna stop the tape. All right, so it'll be just a second.